Hello and welcome to this Barnhizer video lecture series, video on contract remedies, and today we're dealing with Reliance Damages. This is lecture 4 of the Barnhizer video lecture series on remedies. To illustrate Reliance Damages, I'm going to use the case of Walzer versus Toyota Motor Sales. And in that case, you have two parties, Walzer and McLaughlin, negotiating with Toyota for a Lexus dealership. Although the contract was never concluded, Toyota made sufficient promises and representations to Walzer and McLaughlin that they would receive the dealership, that they purchased land for the anticipated dealership. They went out and they actually said, hey, we're going to have a dealership, so we need a place to put it. We buy this parcel of property that helps us get the dealership. When the negotiations ultimately failed, Walzer and McLaughlin sued Toyota for promissory estoppel. Now, in their suit, they were seeking $7.6 million, which included both lost profits and $1 million worth of what they called unamortized expenses. You don't need to worry about the expenses that were unamortized except with respect to one category. The land that they purchased included $676,864 of purchase price that they actually paid out of pocket for the land. Now, the trial court, in looking at the claims for promissory estoppel, the trial court instructs the jury that if the jury finds that Toyota had made an enforceable promise under promissory estoppel principles, justice required limiting Walzer's and McLaughlin's damages just to their out-of-pocket expenses. Regarding the land, this meant that Walzer and McLaughlin were only entitled to the loss in value on the land, not on the $676,864 that they paid for the land. They were also, under a promissory estoppel theory, if you're only recovering Reliance damages, Walzer and McLaughlin were not entitled to recover lost profits. Now, this is a really good case for illustrating the difference between expectancy damages on the one hand and Reliance damages on the other. So first, why do we shift between expectancy and Reliance? Well, the first reason we shift is that expectancy is the default, is the presumptive recovery measure for breach of contract. In contrast, most scholars and most courts think that Reliance damages are the presumptive recovery for promissory estoppel claims. Because Walzer and McLaughlin are proceeding in promissory estoppel, then presumptively they are entitled to recover their Reliance damages. In some cases where the promise is particularly clear and unequivocal and the other elements strongly favor enforcement of the promise, the court may actually use promissory estoppel as a substitute for consideration, and in that case may in some cases allow the party to recover their expectancy damages. But in most situations, promissory estoppel is going to be limited to Reliance damages, the out-of-pocket expenses. The other reason to shift between expectancy damages and Reliance damages is that the primary component of expectancy damages that is not present in a Reliance interest is this idea of lost profits. How much would you have made if the contract had been fully performed? Lost profits, in many cases, may not be provable with reasonable certainty. If those lost profits are not reasonably certain, and therefore can't be recovered, then parties will alternatively seek or pray for damages measured by the Reliance interest. I want to take a moment to talk about two different ways of thinking about the Reliance interest, or rather two components of the Reliance interest. And here we've presented them in terms that Fuller and Purdue used in their article on Reliance damages. essential reliance and incidental reliance. But you might also see these put in or framed in terms of Hadley versus Baxendale, direct or general reliance versus a indirect or incidental reliance. So in their article, Fuller and Purdue identify two different types of reliance damages. The first they called essential reliance, which I would also call direct reliance or direct damages, and second, incidental reliance damages. To identify essential reliance damages, Fuller and Purdue describe this as certain acts of reliance are, in a loose sense, the price of whatever benefits the contract may involve for the plaintiff. This type of reliance we shall call essential reliance. This is just what you are required to do to perform your side of the bargain, the essential elements of your side of the bargain. What is the alternatively known as the costs of performing the promisee's obligations under the bargain. With respect to incidental reliance, this is reliance outside the contract. These are other costs that are incurred in reliance on the existence of the contract, but they're unrelated to performance of the contract itself. So when we look at the Nurse v. Barnes case in the next slide, we'll see that this incidental reliance is encompassed by the court talking about the stock laid in, the additional iron ore and other stuff that is laid in, that is purchased, that is stored and acquired by one of the parties when it's renting an iron mill. In contrast, the essential reliance in Nurse v. Barnes would be the rental price. If the contract is for the lease of an iron mill for £10 for 6 months, then that £10 is the essential reliance. So let's go through Nurse v. Barnes. This is the opinion. The opinion is extremely short. It's just a note in a law reporter's notebook from 1664. And in the note, it provides that the plaintiff declares that the defendant, in consideration of £10, promised to let him enjoy certain iron mills for 6 months, and it appeared that the iron mills were worth but £20 per annum, and yet damages were given to £500 by reason of the loss of stock laid in. And per curiam, the jury may well find such damages, for they are not bound to give only the £10, but also the special damages. What this case is saying is the jury, in calculating damages, is entitled to consider. Here, I'll get my try and get the pen going. The jury is entitled to consider the direct reliance of the £10. This is the cost of performance of the lease contract. The tenant, in order to get access to the iron mill, has to pay the £10. The other side, in order to get the £10, has to provide access to the iron mill. So that £10 is the essential reliance by Nurse in renting the iron mill, what he had to do to perform the contract for the iron mill. In contrast, this £500, the £500 is, or up to £500, it looks from the case that it is probably as much as £490, because it's additional damages. Damages were given to £500. So if you clearly can recover the direct reliance, this £10 of payment for the iron mill, but you get $500 total, that means that the plaintiff, the tenant, had special damages. What were they? The special damages were the loss of the stock laid in. The stock laid in is additional iron ore and other stuff that's acquired by Nurse, by this tenant, for the purpose of running the iron mill, of using the iron mill. And those may be limited by elements of foreseeability, Is it actually foreseeable? In this case, the iron mill has a certain use value, and anyone who is renting an iron mill to others should recognize that those others are going to go out and foreseeably acquire stuff to put into the iron mill to make iron. That's what happened here. 490 pounds worth of stuff to make iron plus 10 pounds of essential Reliance gives our total recovery of 500 pounds. The 490 pounds are the special damages. The 10 pounds are the direct general Hadley 1 type of damages, or in this case, also known as essential Reliance. So why do we care about these two? Well, first, essential Reliance damages are capped by the contract price. You don't get to recover if you're suing in Nurse v. Barnes, for example. The landlord's total liability on these essential damages, the 10 pounds of direct reliance or essential Reliance damages, that payment of 10 pounds required by the contract is the most that the landlord or the tenant can be liable for. If it in fact had been the tenant who was breaching, the landlord can't come back and say, well, this mill I was giving you a special deal. This mill was actually worth 20 pounds for over a 6-month period, and so you should pay me 20 pounds. The landlord can't do that. And so as a consequence, the Essential Reliance Act acts as a cap on the contract price, or the contract price acts as a cap on the Essential Reliance. So just to emphasize that, contract price caps Essential Reliance damages. What this means is if you're in a losing contract, you can't recover more than the contract price by choosing to recover Reliance damages instead of expectancy. We'll see how this works out in Restatement Section 349 as an alternative to the measure of damages stated in 347. So that 347 is value promised minus value received plus other losses minus costs avoided minus losses avoided, our formula for expectancy damages. The injured party has a right to damages based on his reliance interest, including expenditures made in preparation for performance or in performance, less or minus any loss the party in breach. The breaching party can prove with reasonable certainty the injured party would have suffered had the contract been performed. In other words, the breaching party is still able to show that the contract would have been a losing contract. And therefore, the contract price, even if you're going to spend more in performing this contract than the contract is worth, you're still only able to recover what the contract is worth, or the total contract price. This concludes another lecture in the Barnhizer video lecture series on Reliance damages. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.